All right. We are ready to read Act 3, Scene 1. We need a Ferdinand, a Miranda, and a Prospero. Does anybody want to volunteer for any of them?
Where are we?
Act 3, Scene 1. Where Ferdinand is carrying logs. Millie, do you want to be Miranda? All right. All we need now is a Ferdinand and a Prospero. Ferdinand has to read more. You want to be Ferdinand, Roz? All right. Jerry, you want to be Prospero? No, Jerry doesn't want to get in. How about the other Jerry? Do you want to read Prospero's part? Okay. Yeah, it takes a while. Good. All right. Who's Ferdinand? You are. All right. Lead it off. All right. There are 3 preparatory stages prior to initiation in the Rosicrucian Mystery School. Those stages, 3 of them, are not arbitrary, and they are not ceremonial. And initiation is certainly not ceremonial. An initiate is a spiritual power. That is, a human being that has begun to unfold magical and creative powers. One cannot purchase initiation, nor can rite or ceremony confer initiation. There are things by the name initiation that are purchasable, or that are ceremonies, but they are not the real thing. A real initiation one must live into, because initiation is a concentration, and it's an acceleration, or it's an epitome of life itself. And according to how we live it, can we be initiated. So when we hear the phrase living the higher life, it's not just a catchy phrase. It's a reality, and it's a very, very demanding reality. The mountain of truth, or the mountain of spirituality, is a very steep slope. Consequently, initiates are very rare. There is an old maxim which describes this rarity that says, many are called, but few are chosen. It isn't that there's some kind of a culling process that rejects most people, or that there's a black wall or something like that. It's more a matter that individuals seeking initiation disqualify themselves. They fall by the wayside because the path is so steep and they can't go any further. The 3 preparatory stages are like steps, or they're like terraces going up the side of the mountain. They're much more quick than taking the winding path with switchbacks or hairpins or whatever you want to call them. That's much more gradual, but it's slower. These are direct steps right up the mountain. Because they are so steep, sometimes it may take us several lives at each of the steps. Even though there isn't a culling process, these stages do act as filters, so that only the finest can pass through. And the more gross we are left behind, but it's not with prejudice. Before the first of the 3 stages, there is the crowd. That is all of humanity. The masses, hoi polloi, that are living their lives to enjoy themselves, and they have no thought for something higher. Sort of like the plain before the foothills. But some among the masses do recognize that there is something more to life than self-satisfaction. Something that urges them on to look for something more, and they begin to yearn. The first stage in the Rosicrucian initiatory school is studentship. This is the path of initiation for people who approach life by knowledge and by works, rather than by faith and acceptance. So it's only natural that the first step would be a student to study things. As we study things, we learn to discern what is true and what is not true, what is useful, what can be applied to making life better for everyone. By learning to discern what is true and what isn't true, the student on the path begins to dissolve the barrier of doubt. Because you can see that some things happen and some things don't work. Doubt is a very big thing for someone who approaches by knowledge, because sometimes we tend to identify with our doubt rather than identifying with knowing the truth. At the same time, the tactic of having someone be a student first is to satisfy the curiosity, to satisfy the intellectual hunger. And when the intellectual hunger is satisfied, then the heart and the feelings and the truly lofty emotional part of our being and the feeling part of our spiritual being can speak out, because our consciousness is not so cluttered with questions and doubts and all. After the student has been satisfied by studying, that student may be ready to take the next step. And the next step is called probation. And it's very much like probation for one who has been in prison. The person who is a candidate has to prove himself or herself worthy of living in a higher society, in a higher life, just like the prisoner has to prove that he or she is capable of living peacefully and productively in the regular world rather than in prison. The probation officer is not someone without. The probation officer is what we call a higher self, the divine part of our being with which we commune by intuition and by contemplation. Sometimes the probation officer is called the alchemical bride if you're a male, or the alchemical groom if you are a female. When one is in the stage of probation, one no longer has to prove himself or herself, but to live by the dictates of the higher self. That is to serve, and to serve God, and to serve creation, to serve the divine within. This means obedience, absolute obedience. There are several objectives to probation, and one of them is to build moral character. Another is developing and organizing soul power through service. Another is familiarizing oneself and honing the spiritual faculties that we have. And the final is obedience to the divine within. The obedience that we did not have when we fell in Lemuria, as we've been talking about. Without character, without soul power, controlled inner faculties, and obedience, a person would be a menace to the world, especially without obedience. Now, it is not to some arbitrary standard or to some arbitrary creed that someone tries to live by, but it is to what one understands from within. The source of truth, the source of meaning, the source of goodness comes from within. When a person is ready to pass beyond probation to the next stage, there doesn't have to be a test. See, it's free and voluntary all the way. When we pass from being one of the masses to being a student, we do so because we want to. When we sacrifice egoistic living in order to live a life of service, we do that voluntarily. And when we come into direct contact with a spiritual teacher, with a hierophant, which is the next stage, that is done voluntarily. The student can be known by the teacher because the teacher has vision and literally can see the light of the Spirit, how strong it is in the candidate, and determine from that the likelihood of whether they would be able to pass into the next stage. In some cases, it's not completely known. That next stage of direct training about the spiritual worlds is called discipleship. With regard to the alchemical wedding, which is what initiation is, discipleship is something like the wedding rehearsal. One is walked through the various steps, even though when you're being walked through them, it isn't clear right away what they mean. Discipleship is like piano lessons. You sit down on the piano bench with the teacher. Probation is more like daily practice. You practice and practice and practice, and then you have the session with the teacher, and eventually you stand on your own and you can perform. At each lesson in discipleship, the teacher also unfolds the next thing that's going to come. You're always led on to the next thing, so it's very much like piano practice. You're shown what to do, and you're given a run through it, and you're shown, like where you're doing right or wrong, and then you're given an assignment for what the next thing is. In this play, we are saying, and it is likely that Shakespeare is saying, because the Tempest is all filled with magic and initiation, we're saying that Ferdinand and Miranda represent the stage of probation. Ferdinand representing the personality, reaching up to the individuality, and Miranda representing the individuality, reaching down. So now let's review some of the things in the scene we have just read and look at them to see how much they actually do relate to probation, the inward consolation, the inner dialogue between the personality and the individuality. The first speech of Ferdinand, it says, "There be some sports are painful, and their labor delight in them sets off. Some kinds of baseness are nobly undergone, and poor matters point to rich ends. This my mean task would be as heavy to me as odious, but the mistress which I serve quickens." All right, that's far enough, but to give you the gist of it. Last time when we met, we talked about Gonzalo and the party of nobles, and we mentioned looking for the good. Ferdinand, as the probationer, as the one trying to take the step forward, has gone way beyond looking for the good. Looking for the good is trying to find something that is there. But Ferdinand has already had a taste of honey. He's no longer a student that needs to study to find out what's there and what isn't. He's found it. He's got a joy. It's the joy that Christ said, "May my joy be full in you." And that's way beyond optimism. There's almost never any reason for any of us to ever be down. Once we have experienced our true nature and the reality of it, it should be divinely joyous. We have the same things to go through in life that everyone else does, but once we know that the Spirit is there, we can't ever take our personal situation so seriously that we make it an impediment to our spiritual joy. There are times to be serious, and to be sad is not right. We have to be personally focused. Miranda's speech, which responds, "Alas, now pray you work not so hard. I would the lightning had burnt up those logs that you are enjoined to pile. Pray sit down and rest you. When this burns, will weep for having worried you. My father is hard at study. Pray now, rest yourself. He's safe for these 3 hours." That's not typical of the inner dialogue. It's more like one would expect from an earthly lover. This is, after all, a play that has to be put on the world, and it can't really be so otherworldly. Because if it is so otherworldly, it wouldn't be believable, and it would be awfully far-fetched. And Ferdinand comes back and says, "Oh, most dear mistress, the sun will set before I discharge what I must strive to do." That speech reveals another aspect of the life of someone on probation. Time constraints. But the time constraints are not there to put us through some difficult paces. They're not an exercise to see that we can do this much this fast. The idea of time with regard to the mysteries is like the idea of time in music and in astrology. If we lived our lives with the timing that we have from music, our songs would be like symphonies. Our lives would be something that we would sing rather than something that we drudge through. As it is, we cling to things. We want some moments to stretch out and last forever, and others we would just as soon try to skip over. As a consequence, we don't have a proper appreciation of what's happening to us. Destiny does bring about all the important events in our life at just the right times. It is perfect and precise timing. So much so that it's almost ironic, and that we call the workings of destiny poetic justice, because we get just what we want, or just what we deserve. But that seems to be coming from without. When you're on probation, you're doing everything from within. When everything comes from without, it's like listening to music and not making music. We do participate, but our daily participation is sometimes begrudging and under duress and under timing that is called deadlines, which are terrible kinds of things. Ferdinand's speech almost seems like that kind of drudgery, but it really isn't. Tasks are given to candidates for initiation, and there are things like deadlines, but that is in part to get a sense of time, to appreciate the music of life. Another part of it is that the probationer needs to understand the tenor of the Spirit. That is the sense of urgency. There has never been a spiritual teacher of any time that didn't realize, like Paul realized, that there is a sense of urgency, that it is a race, and that we must throw off every fetter and be able to do it. Let's go a little further along to line 33. Noble mistress, 'tis fresh morning with me when you are by at night. Talking about that, wow, I wake up in the morning just as fresh as can be if I have communed with the Spirit. I do beseech you, chiefly that I might set in my prayers, what is your name? Miranda says, Miranda, O my Father, I have broken your hest to say so. Clear that when we live in the Spirit, we really are refreshed. We, as spiritual aspirants, are urged to be in this world, but not of it, to not become world-weary. When we live so, we live more full lives. Our senses are more keen, and they're less without the mode of selfishness and bias and ignorance. We tire less easy because we're not fighting ourselves. We don't have anything at stake personally. We have a humility and a resignation that we've let go. Humility is the opposite of insanity. But they have one thing in common: a lack of ego. And that lack of ego has great strength in it because there isn't any impediment. I'm talking about raving insanity. Like if I look at the bird, the wren out here in the backyard, that wren gives every bit of strength that it has, and its whole body just shivers when it sings. It's a total commitment. And it does it all afternoon long. No human could put up with that ever. But he can do it, the bird can do it, because he has no ego. When a person has gone ravingly insane and has dropped all ego so that the ego is not connected with the personality, sometimes even a little skinny person like myself, it takes 5 or 6 people to put him down. And that's for the same reason. We don't have that same restraint. If we didn't have that restraint, we could have the power that initiates have. That even physically, we would be extremely strong individuals. And that's what Ferdinand is trying to talk about. Ferdinand is probably far enough along in this commitment, and he's willingly serving, he's happy, so he's not all bound up in ego, so you can see that the refreshment is already there. Now the response of Miranda to his request for her name is curious, and it is very spiritually revealing. Why would Prospero want his daughter to keep her name from the young man that he wants her to marry? It's an interesting question. He's cheered every time that they come closer. It doesn't appear to use curiosity, to have Ferdinand be sucked in by curiosity, because he's already in head over heels, almost at first sight. Hierophants do that sometime, but he's hooked irrevocably. The answer to that question, why she would be forbidden to give her name, is found in the mysteries. In the Bible, we're told that Christ Jesus gives the key to the kingdom of heaven to St. Peter. They are not the kind of keys that unlock doors. They are musical keys. The last time we met and we talked about intoxication and how it works, we mentioned how all of the realms and all of the sub-realms are really undertones and harmonics of the original cosmic word, and that all of the states of being, the macrocosmic worlds, come into being in the same way or in a way similar to the way iron filings make geometric forms when there is a vibration by a violin bow. If we pitch our consciousness to the different spiritual realms, we open to them. We attune ourselves to the different worlds. Each key, like a key signature, is just like the opening up to a new world. But each key signature has a distinct quality, a distinct character about it. So they're all syllables of a word. But we're talking about a name, and a name is a very special kind of word. A name is a word that points to a thing or a being. It's much more specific. In the mysteries that go way back to ancient India, initiates have always learned what the book of Revelation calls being given a new name. A new name which is much different than the name we have here in this world. It is our true name. It is our identity. And pretty much we all have the same name. Each of us is a microcosm, an image of God the Spirit. So each of our names is the same, except with the variation according to our character. We are made in the image of God, and God is a spirit. Therefore, we are spirits, or spiritual beings. This is going awfully slow. We might only do 2 scenes tonight. Thus, as we come into our own as spiritual beings, as creative beings, as gods, we learn our true name. And we learn how to speak it, not only with our tongue, but with our life. We speak it with magical creative power. So syllable by syllable, initiation by initiation, we learn our name a little bit at a time, and each is an unfoldment of a different kind of power. The prohibition of Miranda to not reveal her name is very much like the prohibition of not seeing the bride before the marriage. Untried and unpurged, the personality would try to rape the spirit and arrogate its function to itself and its powers to itself, just as Caliban has already tried to rape Miranda and hopes to do so again. It's very much the way Antonio has usurped Prospero's throne And he's urging Sebastian to do the same thing. Apparently, as the scene works out, Ferdinand is far enough along that it does not have that effect. What it does instead is it binds himself much more closely to Miranda. There's something like an unofficial marriage. What we're talking about are the mysteries, and we're making it sound like the steps are carved into the side of the mountain with stone hewing tools. It isn't quite that exact. One doesn't even have to go through the mysteries. If you can produce the effects of the mysteries on your own by living the life in yourself, that's sufficient. It is the union with the Spirit that counts, whether that comes with or without the instruction of a Hierophant. So each of us is probably a little closer to knowing the first syllable of our divine name, and we become more so each day. Each of us have heard or are hearing the shepherd's voice, and we hear it a little bit more clearly. Ferdinand's response, around line 38, admired Miranda, indeed the top of admiration, worth what's dearest to the world. Full many a lady have I eyed with best regard, and many a time the harmony o' their tongues hath filled into bondage, brought into my too diligent ear. He's talking about all of the women he's ever seen in life. It has a lot to do with comparative consciousness and with competitive consciousness, which is the consciousness of this world, which is appropriate because Ferdinand represents the personality that is in this lower world. When we're incarnated into this world in a male body, we see the Spirit as our complement. We see it as feminine. When we look at women in the world, we get hints and intimations and foreshadowings of the divine feminine. But once we've experienced the real thing, it's just like what Ferdinand is saying. Everything before was, they were nice and they captured my attention, but there is nothing now. He has found the pearl of great price, and he has set everything else aside. Miranda's response to that, down along line 48, is revealing also. I do not know one of my sex, no woman's face remember, save from my glass my own. Nor have I seen more that I may call men than you, good friend, and my dear father. How features are abroad I am skillless of, but by my modesty, the jewel of my dower, I would not wish any companion in the world but you, nor can imagination form a shape besides yourself to like of. She's talking about the same experience from the viewpoint of the Spirit. To a large extent, before we come to self-consciousness, the Spirit has hovered above the personality. It has worked from without, and it's worked through the agency of group spirits, tutelary spirits like the guiding spirits of animals. And to a large extent, until this moment, when she discovers the personality that is the perfect reflection of the Spirit, because it is the product of the Spirit, it is the condensation from what the character of the Spirit is. When she discovers that, She is immediately in love with it, and she says, I don't need to see any others than this, because this is it. Because it has to be it, because it is an expression of herself. It's very significant that the jewel of her dowry is modesty or humility. And modesty, as we just said, is the opposite of insanity. Initiation is the essence of waking up spiritually. It is the highest state of sanity. It's when we know the purpose of existence and we know our divine part in it, but also we know humbly our function, our duty, and we submit ourselves to it with obedience. Same kind of obedience that Ferdinand is showing. So in the same way that the personality is humbled and cleansed by the individuality is humbled by the divine. All right. In the next speech by Ferdinand, 59 to 67, I am in my condition a prince, Miranda. I do think a king. I would not so, and would no more endure this wooden slavery than to suffer the flesh fly blow in my mouth, meaning die. Hear my soul speak. The very instant that I saw you, did my heart fly to your service. There resides to make me slave to it, and for your sake am I this patient logman. Ferdinand also realizes his identity. He knows his place in the world, and even though that is a prince or a king, depending on whether his father is alive or dead, the prince or king is a singular being, a singular thing. The personality has one ruler, the Spirit, and the Spirit alone. He knows that relative to the Spirit, that he loves and knows that he's nothing more than a wood boy, and he is joyously so. A few lines further down, Prospero speaks in, and it's down about lines 74 to 76. Very few lines. Fair encounter of two most rare affections. Heavens rain grace on that which breeds between them. That also is supremely accurate to divine union. One does not come to know self, or personality does not come to know self in a vacuum. Because one knows self within the selfness, the spirit of self-ability out of which the self is born. And that state of selfness is the source of grace. So what he's talking about, when it's raining down grace on this union, it is a very true, a very credible statement. In fact, it's extremely accurate. The self can only be known relative to selfness. Otherwise it can't be. We really are going slow. After this, Miranda has a statement, and it's down along 77 to 55. At my unworthiness that dare not offer what I desire to give, and much less take what I shall die to want. But this is trifling, and all the more it seeks to hide itself, the bigger bulk it shows. Hence bashful cunning, and prompt me plain and holy innocence. She goes on to pledge herself in marriage. This is also uncanny in its accuracy. A few years ago, I had an extremely dear friend. We're friends now, but not nearly as close as we were in those days. And this person had spiritual experiences, some of which came under the influence of LSD. And this person described exactly what Miranda is describing. This person called that state of being the fat skinny, because at the same time that there was the modesty that Miranda has and the recognition of the smallness of the individual, there was an awareness simultaneously and interlockingly of the greatness and broadness of it all. It is extremely accurate to the Spirit. The Spirit was and is innocent of selfishness. It's innocent of sin. It transcends. It may make mistakes in its creations and in its workings through the personality, even if the personality is purged and true, because it doesn't know everything in the material worlds, or we wouldn't be experiencing things here. We wouldn't come to all of these rebirths except but to delve deeper into the unknown. But the Spirit is like Miranda, virgin and innocent. So wondrously pure is the Spirit that it makes the essence of worldly deeds something like a song, something sweet to hear, something beautiful to experience. At the end of the speech, Ferdinand and Miranda pledged their troth to each other. This is a betrothal. It's not a marriage. Betrothal and marriage are two different things. Similarly, probation is not the same thing as initiation. There is a promise, and there is a promise that there is going to be the divine union, but it isn't the divine union in itself. So there's a pledge to serve and a pledge to unite in initiation, but that comes later. When we look at the proposal and the betrothal, it is extremely important to see that Miranda proposes first. The prompting to the spiritual life has to come from the Spirit. When it has enough soul power and when it has that divine urgency, it moves us on the path. If the personality tries to do it, it will never, ever be successful. There are lines very reminiscent of this. I'll try to read them. They're poetic, and I'm not always good at reading poetry, but they're from Wagner's Parsifal. And Parsifal is new to the spiritual path. And he is asking, who is the Grail? And Gurnemans, who has been following the Grail for a long time, says, that tell we not, but if thou of him hast been bidden, the truth from thee will not stay hidden. Methinks thy face I rightly knew, the path to him no path leads through, and search severs him wider when he himself is not the guider. So it's only when we follow the impulse from the Spirit. The big question is, as we end the scene, is, did Shakespeare really mean all of these things? Maybe yes, maybe no. It seems an awfully accidental or coincidental paralleling. It's very much like the love duet of Wagner in Siegfried, when the spirit and the personality meet and talk back and forth. And it really is like when we have those inward moments, and it really is a joy to serve the Spirit in ourselves. All right. I think we're only going to do 2 scenes tonight. Otherwise it would be awfully long. I think it would be a 2-hour night. I don't think anybody wants a 2-hour night tonight. All right, who do we need in this scene? We have Stefano, Trinculo, Caliban, and Ariel. I'll take Stefano. Who wants to be Trinculo? No Trinculo? Am I going to have to read all 4 parts? That can't be. I don't have that many voices. Neither do Jerry's want to. Mark, you want to take Trinculo? All right. Who is going to be Caliban? Michael, do you want to try Caliban? All right. We'll let you be Ariel. All right. All right. Tell me not, when the bud is out, we will drink water, not a drop before. Therefore bear up in boredom. Servant monster, drink to me.
Servant monster, the father of the Bible. Say there's but 5 upon the side. We are 3 of them. The other 2 be brave like us, the state potters.
Drink, servant monster, when I bid thee. Thy eyes are almost set in thy head.
Where should they be set else? You were a brave monster indeed if they were set in his tail.
My man-monster hath drowned his tongue in sack. For my part, the sea cannot drown me. I swam ere I could recover the shore, 35 leagues off and on by this light. Thou shalt be my lieutenant, monster, or my standard.
Your lieutenant, if you list. Oh, standard.
Will not run, monsieur monster.
Or go neither, but you lie like dogs and say nothing neither.
Mooncalf, speak once in thy life, if thou beest a good mooncalf.
What does thy honor? Let me lick thy shoe. I'll not serve him. He's not valued.
Thou liest, most ignorant monster. I am encased or justly constable. Why, thou debauched fish thou, lest there ever a man a coward that hath drunk so much sack as I today. Thou tell a monster's lie, being but half fish and half a monster.
Oh, how he mocks me. Wilt thou let him, my lord?
Or, quoth he, that a monster should be such a natural.
Lo again. Fight him to death, I pity.
Trinculo, keep a good tongue in your head. If you prove a mutineer, the next tree. The poor monster's my subject, and he shall not suffer indignity.
I thank thee, my noble lord. Wilt thou be pleased to hearken once again to the suit I made thee?
Marry will I. Kneel and repeat it. I will stand, and so shall Trinculo.
As I told thee before, I am subject to a tyrant, a sorcerer, that by his cunning hath cheated me of the island.
Thou liest.
Thou liest, thou jesting monkey, thou. I would my valiant master would destroy thee. I do not lie.
Trinculo, if you trouble him any more in his tale, by this hand I will supplant some of your teeth.
I said nothing.
Mum, then, and no more. Proceed.
I say by sorcery he got this isle. For me he got it. If thy greatness will revenge it on him, for I know thou darest, but this thing dare not.
That's most certain.
Thou shalt be lord of it, and I'll serve thee.
How now shall this be compassed? Canst thou bring me to the party?
Yea, my lord, I'll yield him to thee asleep. Where thou mayst knock a nail into it.
Thou liest. Thou canst not.
What a pied ninny this! Thou scurvy patch! I do beseech thy greatness, give him blows, and take his bottle from him. When that's gone, he shall drink not but brine, for I'll not show him where the expressions are.
Trincula, run into no further danger. Interrupt the monster one word further, and by this hand I'll turn my mercy out of doors and make a stockfish of thee.
Why? What did I? I did nothing. I'll go further off.
Didst thou not say he lied? Do I so? Take thou that. As you like this, give me the lie another time.
Now give thee the lie. I'll be your whips and hearing too. A pox on your bottle. Whisk and sack and drinking dew. The rain on your monster, and the devil take your finger.
Now forward with your tale. Prithee, stand further off.
Leave him enough. After a little time, I'll beat him too.
Stand further. Come, proceed.
Why, as I told thee, is a custom with him. At the afternoon's sleep, there thou mayst brain him, having first seized his books, or with a log batter his skull, or punch him with a stake, or cut his weasand with thy knife. Remember first to possess his books, for without them he's but a sot as I am, nor hath not one spirit to command. They all do hate him as rootedly as I. Burn but his books. He has brave utensils for so called, which when he has a house will peck the hall. That most deeply to consider is the beauty of his daughter. He himself calls her a non-pariah. I never saw a woman but only Sycorax, my dam, and she. But she as far surpassed Sycorax as greatest does thee.
Is it so brave a lass?
Aye, Lord, she will become thy bed. I warrant, and bring thee forth brave brood.
Monster, I will kill this man. His daughter and I will be king and queen, save our graces, and Trinculo and thyself shall be viceroys. Dost thou like the plot, Trinculo? Give me thy hand. I am sorry I beat thee, but while thou livest, keep a good tongue in thy head.
Within this half hour will he be asleep. Wilt thou destroy him then?
Aye, on my honor.
Thou makest me merry. I am full of pleasure. Let us be joke it. Will you troll the catch? Not me. But while willing.
At thy request, monster, I will do reason, any reason. Come on, Trincula, let us sing. Flautum and scoutum and scoutum and flautum, thought is free. What is this same?
The tune of our catch, made by the picture of Noah.
If thou beest a man, show thyself in thy likeness. If thou beest a devil, take as thou list.
Oh, forgive me my sins.
He that dies pays all debts. I defy thee. Mercy upon us.
Art thou afeard?
No, monster, not I.
Be not afeard. The isle is full of noises, sounds and sweet airs that give delight and hurt not. Sometimes 1,000 twangling instruments will hum about my ears. Sometimes voices that if I had waked after long sleep will make me sleep again. And then in dreaming the clouds methought would open and show riches ready to drop upon me. And when I wake I cry to dream again.
This will prove a brave kingdom to me, where I shall have my music for nothing.
Prospero is destroyed.
That shall be by and by. I remember the story.
Sound is going away. Follow it. After do our work.
Lead, master, we'll follow. I would I could see this taborer. He lays it on.
Come. I'll follow the sound.
Clearly, this is not an important scene for the development of the play. Not even as we're viewing it. Perhaps it is filler, and it's not at all like the central scene of the play that we've seen in every other play that we've seen. Usually the middle scene of the middle act is the big turning point. There are some clever lines in the first part of it. If one is familiar with the language, there are even some very subtle puns in it. Perhaps it is not filler, and it is intended to be this way. Shakespeare is often considered to be a Stoic, a man with no moral bias, so that he doesn't slant things, and he doesn't have inhibition, and he can present characters and circumstances clearly. Now, in part, that seems correct to me. He can indeed create very accurate characters, but I don't think it is from a moral vacuum. Rather, it seems as if he creates them from divine love and appreciation, a love so great that even a nasty person is created truly with love, because even though there is a perversion of something divine, that nasty person still is an expression of something divine. Now, the Shakespeare plays are not what we would in a modern sense of drama call slice-of-life plays. They have some realism in it, and when they are realistic, they're not slice-of-life. But they're not unbelievable fantasy either when they have fantastic elements. In the audience, everybody knows there's an imaginary realm, but that imaginary realm is not offensive to the audience. Everybody goes right with it. It's as if Shakespeare is very familiar with the human psyche and with the laws of imagination that work within it, and he never violates those laws, and therefore it's easy to take it. Insecure playwrights try to exaggerate things just a little bit too much, and they become offensive. He doesn't do that. He never violates in that way. He can offer concentrations in character, and he can have a person stand out more dramatically than they would in life, but he can do it without straining our credulity. If this scene is not filler, and it doesn't do much to develop the plot or even the subplot, what does it do? It doesn't develop lovish clowns as much as some of the other clowns in Shakespeare are developed. Some of them are quite witty, and they're really characters. These aren't quite like that. Instead, it seems as if this scene is showing us the inanity and the banal, humdrum emptiness of our lives when we do live in lower consciousness and in purposeless existence. There are people, I spent a good deal of my life, who talk about their next and last binge as though the experience itself wasn't sufficient for them, or that they have to anxiously speak about it from without. I even knew a man that his nickname was Big Jag. He said, I'm going out on a Big Jag tonight, and he would talk about what his drunk was going to be before going out on it. If you've ever seen a barroom brawl, the inebriates do challenge each other and are sensitive to challenges to their pride just as much as in this play, even without an Ariel. Ariel is almost superfluous in here in inciting. People do laugh at scenes like this, and not merely at the wit, and not merely at the appreciation of the characters and the acting, and not even at the absurdity of it all. Some people laugh at things like this because their anxiety is temporarily relieved. They can feel like they're out of it or that they're above it, but not so much that there is no personal concern. If a person is sober, by that I don't mean just not drinking, but if a person is sober in their consciousness, drunkenness is not funny at all. But for somebody who has anxieties about it and can see it happening to somebody else, just like somebody else gets the pie in the face, it seems funny. Now this kind of scene, which has so little content and not a great deal of character development, is a very hard scene for a playwright to produce. The wit is delightful, the characters are delightful, much more so than any real drunk would be. I've seen a few witty drunks, but most of them not at all. The hard part to produce in a play is the idiotic emptiness. And to do that without offending the audience, or without the audience feeling too creepy about their own emptiness. Just as Hamlet's stepfather, when he saw the play, saw his own guilt, and he couldn't deal with it, a lot of people can't put up with the emptiness of their own lives when they have to confront it, even seeing it on a stage. If we look at the emptiness and meaninglessness of life and how hard that is to create, especially like a brilliant mind, there's a simple thing you can do. Anyone say something that is completely meaningless. It's very hard to do. You can't put down words that are meaningless. It's almost impossible. Now, some modern plays like Waiting for Godot do portray in clever ways, and mostly cleverness, the emptiness of our lives, but they don't do it with the background of divine, boundless purpose. Shakespeare is very successful at that. If we do step out of our lives, we can see the emptiness of a lot of things that we do. They're just as much dumb shows as this whole scene is. It seems that the only reason that we can tolerate our lives and find importance in being here is because we unconsciously sense that even behind all of our inanity, there is something immensely purposeful and something that is sufficient in its grace to condone our inanity. It is our task to see that purpose and to consciously bring it into the attention of ourselves and those around us in every part of our lives. Everything we do deliberately. It's one of the quickest ways to become clairvoyant, and one of the quickest ways to become an initiate is to do everything with complete and total self-consciousness, total deliberation. Very quickly, we learn, just as the student learns what is true and not true, we learn what things in life have heart in them and what things do not. Down along lines 91 to 106, there is a common misunderstanding that is voiced by Caliban. In our abstracted state, in our removed state, where we do not see the inside of nature at the same time that we see the outside, we do use books as lenses or as windows to help our removed intellect to look into and to go back into inner reality. But by the time that we get as far along in magic and creativity, and as adept as Prospero is, we have to take off the training wheels. We don't need those kinds of restrictions. We throw away the books, and everything proceeds to us from life. We may have used books to get there, but somewhere along the way the books get set aside. In fact, it's even too much of a stretch to think of the books as the book of nature or the book of God. The speech of Caliban along lines 140 to 148, where he's talking about the island being full of noises and sounds and music, is very worthy of note. In these mysticism classes and the classes in astrology, we have been speaking of the music of the spheres. Last time we met, and a little bit earlier in this evening, we spoke of the cosmic word and its undertones and harmonics, which manifest all the spiritual worlds, including this one. What stands between us and the experience of these spiritual worlds is our lack of focus and our lack of subtlety. We are not at all subtle in our consciousness and in our perception. This is why we try to purify ourselves from everything that is unessential, so that we have that clarity, so that we can become more subtle, so that we can attune ourselves to the inner reality. When this is accomplished, when we do hear the music of the spheres, and when we do hear the different realms, it's not for ourselves alone. It could even be if we wanted to. There is what has come to be called the 100th monkey effect. Each time we attain something in our consciousness, we amplify it in the general background consciousness that belongs to all. It's the property of all of humanity. There is no such thing as intellectual property rights in terms of spiritual consciousness. This is why we can do our part and we can serve humanity without even leaving our room. We can see right into the spiritual worlds. We can come to insights. We can reach little bits of enlightenment, and they apply to the whole world. Apparently, Prospero is so adept in his consciousness and has gone so far and has so much strength that his awareness of the music of the spheres permeates the whole island. And under the amplification of his consciousness, everybody can hear it, even the drunkards. All right, we'll quit there, and next time we'll finish out the act and maybe get a scene or two into the next one.
So much to do that the sun will set before I shall discharge what I must write.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah. What he's basically saying is this life will end before,
Yes. Yes, that's the pacing. That is sort of like the cosmic deadline. You realize the race must be run, and that every obstacle must be removed to do so. but it's divine timing and not human nervous deadlines. Well, thank you very much. I think it went really nice tonight. Even missing a few people, yeah.
One other thing, the second scene where you talk about the anatomy and stuff. It is kind of, I mean, one does look at it, when one takes a few steps back and looks at, I won't say looks at life, but all you have to do is go to like a basketball game, football game, or any event, and then just observe. And it's like everybody's in their own little world, making a big to-do.
Yes. Well, if you take it like you like to tinker. And when you're tinkering, you're working with principles. But when you have people that cannot stand to be in life, not tinkering, not even watching a game, but they have to take themselves out of it with intoxication, that means somebody who's really has an empty, worthless life. And then what did they do? They talk about how they stupefied themselves.
It's a statement, I forget who the heck says it, but I think it's the difference between being and doing. A human doing versus a human being.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I got.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. Gradually, we're getting to be a little bit. I like going slower. We have more time to appreciate. Not exactly astrology, was it?
No.
You can take it along with you, or just leave it here. Yeah. Yes.